Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the book study of the Transformative Leader. It is so great to have you. I am so excited about this conversation, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us. I'll tell you what, I've been looking at those registrations coming in, and it is so exciting. Let me just mute this thing, and I want to say that, up front, just as a disclaimer, this is not some polished up keynote. It's not even like a webinar that we've done a lot of planning around exactly what to say and what to do and all this kind of stuff. This is an interactive conversation. It is really designed to be a conversation with you. We have people basically from just about, I want to say, every continent register for this book study, with the exception of Antarctica. We have to figure out how to get our books up there, but we've shipped the books to about 30 countries, and I know of several more where we've received messages where we didn't ship them the book, but somehow from events or whatever, they ended up there. So we've got this global conversation going on that I'm really, really excited about. And so those of you who are on this call, who are taking the time to be here with us, are really kindred spirits. I connect with you in a really meaningful way. And I want this exercise, this series, to be something that truly makes a difference for you. I remember when I was in the process of writing the book, and really the intention was all about making a difference for people who kind of feel stuck in some way, whether it's in their personal life or in their professional pursuits. And so it was a labor of love to do this, and so is this conversation. So really, thank you so much for being here. Let me cover a couple of logistics here. If you've signed up for this session and you want to attend the other ones, please make sure that you go back and sign up for as many of these as you possibly can. And I know there's a lot going on and you may not be able to make all of these. So what we are going to do is we're going to make the recordings available for some period of time after the series is over. Of course, it's always better if you're here and we get to interact. And speaking of interaction, what I'm going to ask you to do is really raise your a couple of ways to act. One is put your comments in the chat box. You could send them to me directly, or you could send them to everyone. Nassim is also on the call as a co-host, as many of you know. Nassim is my daughter, my business partner, and she's probably more responsible for publishing this book than I am, or she handled a bigger part of this, but we'll get into that in a few minutes. So you can talk to us via chat, or at some point, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to ask you if you would like to actually speak up and speak your question. So in which case we are going to unmute you. We have muted everybody, and we're going to hopefully keep everybody muted, so we keep the dogs from barking in the background, and doors being open and shut and all of that. But if you want to say something, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and the way you can do that is you can push the participant button, and there you see a list of participants. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, there is a button there that says raise hand. So if you raise your hand and we see it, we will call on as many people as we possibly can so we can have those conversations. Okay, and so the other things about the logistics, so we can kind of get those out of the way and we'll get right into this book study, is that there were no reading assignments for this particular session, because I wanted to just use this time to set the context and go over the first part, about 80 pages of the book, some of the key components of the first part, which really has to do with the characteristics of a high commitment culture and the characteristics of leaders and all of that. And I'm going to do all of this with sort of a slant toward today's situation, what we're dealing with, the kind of the sort of changes that we're having to deal with. But in general, the first 80 pages of the book really have to do with leadership in an organizational kind of setting, whether you're the boss or not. I think you'll find that helpful. And then the next 4 sessions, what we're going to do is in each of those sessions, we're going to cover 2 of the 21-point lessons that we have in the book. Okay, and just to make things easier for you and give you a little bit of time in case you've ordered, many of you have ordered books, and those are in the mail. We've already gotten them out safely. And we appreciate that, but we wanted to make sure that at least you have the reading assignment for the next session. So we're going to meet every Thursday, same time. And so for the next session, when you registered, you should have received the link for the reading assignment for the next session. So you can download those and do your reading for that. And so for the next 4 sessions, because there are reading assignments, I'm really looking forward to you coming into these conversations, having already at least skimmed the material, even if you didn't read every word. Preferably, I'd like you to read it. And so here, what we do is not necessarily just read the whole thing, but what we're going to do is I'm going to cover some of the highlights, and we're going to engage in a conversation that I'm sure everybody is going to benefit from. So those are just a few things about the logistics. Now, if you don't have the book, some of you registered directly on Zoom, but you may know that you can go to theganadgroup.com/book-study. We're going to put that in the chat for you. So theganadgroup.com/book-study, and there you can again sign up for those other sessions that you haven't signed up for, and you can also look at some of the other virtual offerings that we have, as well as if you haven't ordered the book and you would like to do so, you can do that there. And there are several options. You can get the soft copy, if you will, the paperback, and we will send it to you. You could get the ebook immediately. There's a link there for Amazon. And you can also get the audiobook. If you're not on Audible, you can actually sign up to get the audiobook for free with a Audible trial. So there's a link right there that you can use to do that. If you are, of course, on Audible, you can get that as one of your credits. Anyway, so that's how you get the book. And if you have any questions for us, please go ahead and put it in the chat box to Nassim, and she'll answer your questions relative to that. But let's dig into this book study that I've been so excited about. Look, a little about my back. I think many, if not all of you, have exposure to me. I'm not some famous person that people kind of signed up for. Anybody who signed up for this thing has at some point been in one of my sessions, your friends, your family members, and all of this. But in case you don't know much about me, basically what I do is I do leadership development and culture transformation work. For the last 3.5 years or so, we've had our own consulting firm, the Ganad Group. It's me, my wife, Connie, and my grown kids, Naveed and Nassim, and we're having a blast doing what we love to do. But prior to that, I spent 31 years in various corporate leadership roles. Started out as a maintenance manager in Albany, Georgia with Procter & Gamble, then moved around the world, went to Thailand for 8 years, a little over 8 years, then Dover, Delaware, then Germany for about 3 years, then back to the States, was working for Sunny Delight. And then the last 4 years of my career, I worked with Campbell Soup Company. And so during these times, I really encountered, obviously, a lot of challenges, personally and professionally. And I was always writing these little Post-it notes. So this was like before Twitter and somewhat before even, Facebook and all this kind of stuff. So I had tons of these Post-it notes and voice notes that I would someday put in a book. So the kids had heard me say that for many, many years, that someday I'm going to publish this book. I had sort of designed the cover. It looked horrendous, but it was something to go for. So at some point, what happened was that Nassim basically kicked my butt back in 2015 and said, look, you preach this message of don't put things off for someday. you ought to go ahead and publish this book. And in fact, she took over the project and she designed the cover, and she got her brother involved, and the two of them did some editing, and she figured out exactly how to self-publish, and the book was born back in 2015. In fact, let me just kind of take a little side trip here for any of you who would like to publish a book. I would encourage you to do that, to make it happen. And I remember when we started on this journey, I had all kinds of questions in my head, and I was wondering which questions, what is it that I don't even know that I don't know, right? But again, Nassim has figured all of this out. And if you go to the ganadgroup.com and go to the store, after the call, I would encourage you to do that. Go to the store, and there is an item there which is available for free. So it's something like the manuscript to book or something like that. So it's a guide that shows you how to make things happen, and how to basically go from an idea to getting your book published. And so that was just a little side note for that. But some of the ideas that really kind of culminated in this book being published were that in sort of around the time that I was doing that work, putting the ideas together, what was going through my head was all about the sort of the pressures that I had in my life at the time, and they centered around the fact that our plant that I was a plant manager of was not doing well. In fact, we were the worst plant in the company. We had a lot of stress. Our culture wasn't right and all of this kind of stuff. And it was a very, very painful time in my life. And I was trying to work through what it takes to actually get a breakthrough and make things happen. And all these ideas were coming to me, and I was trying some of them. Some of them were working, some of them weren't working. But in the end, I had ended up with a whole bunch of different things that really I felt that if somebody else knew it and they could put it into practice, then it would really make a difference for them. And so the book is not necessarily a bunch of theory about here's what you should do and all of this kind of stuff. It is really sort of a conversation, and I hope some of you have read the book can vouch for this, that it's a conversation about real life situations. And so the first third of the book, the 80 pages, is really about culture, leadership, and so on and so forth. But the last part of the book, 21 point lessons, is all about life lessons, things that I've learned. And one of the things I struggled with in writing this book, to be honest, was that I didn't want to write a book with a bunch of prescriptions to say, go do this and your life will be good. Because I just frankly don't know, right? Because I don't know where you are in your life, what challenges you're facing. But in the end, what it turned out to be was a conversation that would spark ideas for you. So the testimonials that we've received really reinforced to me that we actually hit that mark, in that this is not coming across as some sort of a prescription, but it gives you some ideas that are thought-provoking. And then what happens is you think about it, because at the end of each chapter, each 1 point lesson, we have these questions, right? The reflection questions and recommended actions that you ought to take. So I'm really happy that the book has had that kind of an impact. And in this series, I want to kind of expound on that and make sure that we basically give you a more meaningful version of this. The one thing that you may have heard me say before is I am the one and it's not about me. And writing of this book was also the same thing. For me, at the beginning, when it started, it wasn't about me. It was all about making a difference. In fact, I had Connie brought me this to show you. I've got this on my wall. I know you can't really read the stuff, but basically it's just the working version of this, the working copy, and the ultimate copy. But then these are some of the Post-its. I don't know if you can see it. But one of the Post-its here says, my book is the answer to someone's prayer. And this is a very significant one for me, one that I look at every time I come into my office. because I had to remind myself that in those moments where I felt like, well, maybe this book is not going to be so great. What are they going to think about me? What if they don't like it? All of those thoughts were about me. And I had to remind myself that somebody somewhere could really benefit from what I had to say. And I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to look good and all of that. In fact, here's something else I want you, this is a very central message to this book. So this is why I want to share this story with you, before we kind of dig into this, in that, Nassim gave me a bunch of writing assignments, right? So I had a full-time job, and at the same time, at nights, I was writing. And on the weekends, I was writing. And it was just flowing out of me. It was really a fantastic experience. But then at some point in the process, it dawned on me that I was going to be an author, right? I'm going to be famous. I might even be rich. And so this started sort of filling my head. It's like, wow, this is going to be a cool experience. And I kid you not, what happened was at that time, it started really drying up. Like, I would write stuff, but it wasn't anything really profound or meaningful. It was just kind of filling some pages. And so it took me, I hate to admit, it took me weeks and maybe a couple of months even before I realized that. And I had to catch myself to say, look, I'm the one, it's not about me. So let that go. My book is the answer to somebody's prayer. And so I would encourage you, I think one of the themes that you see or hear, throughout the book is that it is not about you, but you are the one. You can make a difference for somebody. And if you get out of your own head, you can do even a better job of that. So anyway, so we published the book, and basically the book is now being used by several corporations, many smaller companies as a book study. I mentioned that to say that if you want to start a book study with your team, I've put together a book study format, a standard one, which I'm happy to send to you. So just communicate with us, let us know, send us an email at info@the Group, or put something in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we'll get back to you with that, again, complimentary version of the book study. But several corporations, what they've done is they've actually modified that. I've actually helped some of them do that. So we've modified the book study, and they are doing it on their own. They don't necessarily need me. They just get the books and do it. So if you have an interest, talk to us, and we're happy to customize something for you. Now, the next question is, who is this book for? Because the title says The Transformative Leader, right? So on the face of it, you can look at it and say, well, wait a minute, I'm not a leader. I'm a frontline employee. I don't have anybody reporting to me. But there are two misconceptions that I want to clear up on this. The first thing is, first of all, you are a leader. I don't care that you're not the boss. You don't have anybody reporting to you. Every person is leading their own life, right? So the transformative leader doesn't have to be a CEO. The transformative leader could be that new hire who's just started, who said, look, I'm an aspiring leader, but what I want to do is I want to lead my life personally and professionally. So that's number one. The second thing that I want to bring up here, though, is the subtitle of the book is really sort of the essence, speaks to the essence of the book. It says, boldly declare, courageously pursue, and abundantly achieve the extraordinary, which is the opposite of just deal with whatever's right in front of you. I get it. Sometimes, like times like right now, we have to survive before we can thrive. I get it. And it's really, really important that you look at what's going on right in front of you. But I also know that while it's important that, if you're driving in the fog, that you don't necessarily look way out there, that you just turn on your fog lights and take that next step. When you're in survival mode, when you're dealing with a global pandemic, you know what? You got to deal with what's in front of you. While that's important, it is so energizing when you boldly declare a future. And you say, you know what? Yes, I'm dealing with whatever I got to deal with now, but I got something to look forward to. So in this book, basically what I do is I break down what it takes to actually do all of those things. First of all, really make some bold declarations in whatever aspect of your life. And secondly, make some, courageously pursue it. Don't be stopped. And thirdly, abundantly achieve, as opposed to sort of sabotaging yourself. So the book, bottom line, is for everybody. And so if you're on this call and obviously you've made the choice to be here, but if you're trying to figure out, look, is this really worth my time? Because, I assure you, no matter what aspect of your life you choose to apply these principles to, it will be there for you. It will help you. I have testimonials from people who've gotten promoted, people who've lost 60 pounds in a short period of time, people whose marriages have been restored. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff. This is not advertising for the book. You're here already. What I'm saying to you is I'm trying to create a context for you that says, look, today we're going to talk in the context of organizations, but for the rest, even today's conversation can be applied to you, because every one of us works somewhere or has worked somewhere or will work somewhere, even though we're working from home right now. But then certainly the rest of this book study, create that context and let's go from there, and it's going to work for you. Okay, so let me stop here for a moment. I'm going to check the chat box here and see if we have any questions or comments at this point. And I'm going to ask Nassim to also help me with that. Let me see.
Hey, Amir. I've been chatting with Belinda, Joe, who I met in New York City.
So that's fine. So we don't have any questions at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get into the book and the sort of the premise of the book, what the book is all about. And so today we're going to kind of create this picture of what's going on and what the book is all about and the context of it. And then what we're going to do is we are going to dig into the rest of the 1-point lessons. So the basic premise, and remember, I've already told you, this is not a polished up presentation. So I've got the overview of the Transformative Leader. I've got a copy of it over here, and I want to make sure that I really kind of go over my notes and cover some of the key topics for you. First of all, one of the premise of this Transformative Leader is that there is a transformative leader inside each of us, right? And so I'm not here to make you a transformative leader. You already are one. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Or I'm getting a signal that says I need to unmute myself, but I apologize. Nassim, can you hear me?
You need to unmute your sound on your computer.
Oh.
Unmute computer.
Oh, unmute my computer. Okay, I am so sorry.
That's okay. When you were asking for comments in the chat, I was answering, but you couldn't hear me.
Okay, so here we go. One of the many glitches we're going to have probably on this thing. So I was trying to keep the computer from making all kinds of noise, and I cut it off, so I couldn't even hear Nassim. So Nassim, is there anything you want to share with us right now?
Well, I would love to, because I've got a few people in the chat who've said hello. Joe Wishon from, I think he lives on the West Coast, who I met in New York City when I was living there. Oh, I see Michael Devane over here. And Belinda Burney is chatting with us, and so is Barbara Ardell. So yeah, a lot of great people.
Really super. I see some of the names and a couple of the faces. Thank you so much. And Rosita says she received the book. Absolutely my pleasure. Wonderful, wonderful. Really, really great to have you. I tell you what, I mean, I'm looking at these names right here, and I'm going to stop because I'm going to start crying right now because I feel so attached and so close to so many of you, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Anything else, Nassim, that you want to share?
That's it so far. Carry on.
Right. Thank you so much. Anyway, look, the premise of this book is I want everybody like you, not y'all, but like you. I want you to know that there is an extraordinary transformative leader inside of you. There have been many times in my life where I lost track of that guy, right? Where I felt like a victim. I felt like, oh, geez, my life is not going anywhere. I've got these challenges and so on and so forth. And so I want you to know that, because just based on my own experience, I know that there is a transformative leader inside of you. And the reason you don't feel like it sometimes and you don't act like it sometimes is because there's some stuff in the way. And we're going to get it out of the way. So that's what this book is all about. That's what this conversation is all about. So right now, especially, right, because you have all these challenges and life has changed a lot, you know, and I won't go through the details. You know, everybody's facing some challenges, and we get in our own heads, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, is this ever going to get any better? Am I going to be able to make it happen? And I assure you, there is a transformative leader inside of you. And as a result of this conversation, you'll get back in touch with it. The next thing is that transformative leadership is not about just picking up additional skills and tools. Yes, tools and skills are important, but what it's about is you being and showing up a certain way. And so throughout the book, you'll see a lot of that, where I'm going to support you with that. You know, at the end of the day, leadership is a choice. Whether you're leading your own life or you're leading a group of people, you're leading a corporation, leadership is a choice. You can either show up and kind of be at the effect of the situation, or you could say, you know what, I think I'm going to do something with that. And sometimes we talk ourselves out of being extraordinary because we're thinking, well, who am I? I mean, is it going to make a difference? Let me tell you, I'm just going to make a confession right now. Look, you may have seen my posts on social media and LinkedIn and videos that I make and the stuff that I write. I'm always doing something. It seems like these days I'm even busier than I used to be. And I am so fortunate when I receive these wonderful comments from you all. You don't know the difference that it makes for me. You say, wow, Amir, that made a difference for me. Thank you so much. But in the back of my mind, the secret I want to share with you is this whole thing of, am I making a difference? It shows up all the time. Who am I? I'm not making a difference. You know, I'm just putting something out there. And is this actually doing something for somebody? So it shows up for all of us. And the good news I have for you is this. I heard somewhere that, you know, when you have this imposter syndrome, right? One of the best things I heard about imposter syndrome that I've tried to embrace is that the real imposters don't feel it. So if you have imposter syndrome and you feel like I'm not going to make a difference, or I fooled them, it's because you're not an imposter. You are making a difference. So I had to get in touch with that the hard way, and I hope you do as well. The other part of the premise of the book is that look, it is never the size of the challenges that we face, but the size of our commitment that makes a difference. I get that sometimes our challenges, like a global pandemic, for instance, could seem so overwhelming. And you might say, well, wait a minute, how can you say that? But here's what I'm going to tell you. Look, many of you have heard my story. For many years, I had this workout program that I didn't follow. And then I would look, you know, on TV, I would see these, what is it, Paralympic events, right? And here's a guy who's missing both legs and one arm, and he's competing in the shot put event. And I'm like, wait a minute, that guy's challenges are so much bigger than mine. But you know what? So is his commitment. And so I assure you, through this conversation, we're going to supercharge your commitment. So you're not just telling yourself all the time how this challenge is going to defeat you, but you're going to talk about internally and to others how you are going to rise above. So this is what's going to happen. The other thing is there's a strong focus on self-awareness, you know, throughout this book. My experience is that most people want to change the world, right? If you ask people, hey, what's wrong with this world? What's wrong with the culture in your workplace? What's wrong with your results? Everybody has a genuine desire to change things, make things better. But not too many of us are willing to change ourselves. And so there's a element of self-awareness in this thing that runs through, which I think ultimately is what really empowers you, okay? Now, with that, let me pause again and see if Nassim has anything for us that needs to be shared as I start this.
Yeah, we do have one question in
Yeah.
the chat from Joy. She says, in quotation marks, "Am I making a difference?" And then, what if people are falsely believing they are?
Yeah. So this is a good one, right? Because there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, right? Because it's like, look, if somebody is thinking so highly of themselves to say constantly without any kind of feedback, without being in touch with who they're serving and all that, thinking they're the greatest gift to mankind. I'm not talking about that extreme. I'm talking about those of us who are in the middle here, constantly doubting ourselves. I think, I'm not talking about thinking so highly of yourself, but thinking about yourself and getting less and getting out of your head about whether you're making a difference. Just commit to a cause and do the best that you can, and don't take yourself out of the game because you don't think you're making a difference. And that's a great question, Joy. I think this is something we all have to really watch out for, right? Very cool. Anything else?
That's it for now.
All right, super. So there is actually one part of the book that I just want to read from the book, because it's one thing to describe it, but I think these words just sort of were the genesis of sort of my motive for writing the book, because it started with making sure that we create the right culture in our workplace. You could also say in our family, in our community, so that we are all feeling supported and all that. So let me just read this. If you just bear with me, I will read this part for you. Imagine a world where the workplace is a source of inspiration rather than a source of anguish and frustration. And as you listen to this, please think about your workplace. Please think about your community and see how it would feel. Kind of go there with me. It's a place where employees experience growth and development, and where they bring their best to work every single day. They are loyal to their employer and know that their employer cares about them as people, not just as interchangeable tools that serve particular functions. They collaborate with and generously contribute to one another and experience an abundance of satisfaction. The team is out to win, and they use guidelines and standards as a solid foundation to build on, not a ceiling that inhibits their creativity and autonomy. The objectives of the employees and the employer are inseparable. So people don't have to choose between doing what is right for the company and what is right for them personally. The employees and the company not only deliver superior results, but have an inherent desire to get better that keeps them moving forward. Now, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to read the rest of this, but here's the point. If all of this sounds a bit too Pollyanna, and believe me, I've been told throughout my career, oh, that's touchy-feely stuff, that's too Pollyanna, you're just too optimistic. If all of this sounds a bit too Pollyanna, or if it sparks some cynicism in your mind, it is because the great majority of us have given up on creating such environments in our workplaces and have settled for something far less satisfying or profitable. So this is, I'm reading from page 17, this is introduction. We all want to be part of a team like that, but we often get overwhelmed at the thought of what it would take to create such a culture. We see it as the responsibility of someone else with more power than us to transform our workplace. Even those of us who take on making it happen often don't know where to start. I mean, can you relate? Even those of us who want to make it happen, we just don't know where to start. And consequently, we quickly become overwhelmed and give up. Just a few more lines, and then we'll get into this conversation. Even if we somehow manage to overcome this personal roadblock, we may have eventually given up in the face of the organizational force that maintained the status quo. But what if it really could be done? What would be the benefit to the individuals and the business units? What if we figured out a way to deliver benchmark results and have the people in our organization fired up about constantly getting better? What would happen to the profitability and productivity of the team, business unit, or the company for that matter? What kind of prosperity and peace of mind would it create in the lives of the people in that workplace? How about their families and their acquaintances? What kind of far-reaching impact would the cultivation of such workplace culture have on the economy and the well-being of a nation? And I dare say the world. You see, the why behind this book is so much bigger than one team or one workplace or one person, all that. The why behind this team is, look, is if each one of us takes the time to really get in touch with that transformative leader inside of us, and if each of us practices some of these things that I'm talking about in here, and we create a cohesive team, then what in turn happens is not only we are at peace individually, but we're together very much more effective. Profitability goes up, economy gets better. Ultimately, it's about world peace. It really is. I know this sounds like a Miss Universe contest, right? World peace. Those are the only people who talk about world peace these days. But it's possible because it has to start with us and our team and our workplace to make it happen. And you know what? I've experienced this. I've experienced this as a leader of an organization. I mean, I'm talking about at the level of nirvana, where we just basically went from being in a really bad situation to really having a culture that not only delivers extraordinary results, but really blesses everybody. And I've also experienced this, I'm happy to say, as a consultant with the organizations that I've worked with, okay? So let me pause here for a moment and see if there is anything else that we want to talk about, anything in the chat box before I zip through the rest of this first part of the book.
Yeah, we do have something from Mark Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He says, what advice would you give to someone who embraces this but finds resistance from above?
Oh, yes. The advice I have is, first of all, you're not alone. Okay, there are basically, this is the most common issue, and I hate to say it, the most common issue is that those of us in the middle of the organization don't necessarily feel like we have the support of our bosses. But you know what? This is not something that I would be surprised at. It's not something that I would say, oh, geez, that's a really unique situation. We got to do something else. That's what this book is written for. Those are the people that this book is written for. Because what I want to do is I want to empower you to make a difference from the middle of the organization. In fact, that is exactly what happened for me. Because even though I was the plant manager, you know what? I had a lot of bosses. And in some cases, my bosses didn't necessarily see the value of what I was doing. And so when you start with that personal transformation, then you begin to look at that resistance a little bit differently. Instead of sort of resenting it, you begin to say, okay, I feel more empowered now, even without my boss's support, to begin to make some things happen. And you make believers out of them. So stay tuned for what we're going to talk about. Great question. Thank you.
We also have another question from Chad. And before I read it, I just wanted to let all the participants know that you guys can raise your hand if you'd like to voice your own question. But I'm also very happy to read your question aloud. Chad says, I see 100%, or I 100% see that why, but how do you show the decision makers that we are falling far short of that? Yes.
And this is something that we're going to answer throughout this this series. So it's a very good question. And so for me, the short answer is create some wins and create some evidence that in fact, things are working. But there's going to be a period of time. I won't lie to you. At the beginning, you're going to make some things happen and you're going to expect them to see it, but they don't see it. So there's some frustration at the beginning of this. But then you begin to gain some momentum, and I'm going to share that with you. Stay tuned during the series. I love these questions because that's the real world, right? That's what we're dealing with. Any other questions?
Oh, we just got one from Nadia. She says, what about a leader who has 95% of the staff engaged, but cannot crack 1 or 2 negative influencers? I feel like I go forward 1 step and go back 2.
Really great. Again, these are wonderful questions. So here's what I'm a big fan of: feeding the grass, not trying to go and kill all the weeds, right? So I'm really big on making sure that you continue to work with the early adopters and the early majority. However, having said that, what I'm going to tell you is if you have 1 or 2 people that are sabotaging progress, you got to deal with it. You cannot just, ignore what's going on, because what's happening is that they are undermining what you've got going on. So it's important to put the majority of your focus on nurturing the early adopters and sort of creating a majority that people want to follow. But if you've got a few naysayers and they're constantly and overtly going against, treat them with respect and dignity, because as a person, their worth is not dependent on whether they are with you on your organizational goals or not. They are a human being. Their worth doesn't change. So treat them with respect and dignity, but be very clear with them that you're not going to tolerate what they're doing to sabotage progress. Okay. Anything else, Nassim?
That's all we have for right now.
All right, fantastic. So I love it. I love the series already. I might just even extend it. Really wonderful. I'll tell you what, I'll share a little secret with you guys, that, we are very, very actively looking at creating a forum where those of us, like-minded people can get in touch and talk, on a regular basis. And we are going to tell you more about this as the time comes, but I just couldn't wait to say that, because you know what, as much as I've been looking forward to this conversation, I look forward to doing this a few times a week with you, just having a chat about real conversations or real challenges. So let me go ahead and cover a few other things and go from there. So one of the sections that I have in the book on page 25 is how to get the most out of this book. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically there are a few things that I want to just share with you. First of all, you got to recognize that this is not about informative training, like this book is putting some knowledge on you. Yes, you will get some knowledge, but it's mostly transformative learning, which is different than informative. I'm not trying to put a lot of things on top of you. I'm trying to get some things out of the way so that whatever's out of the way, whatever's in your way, you can get it out of the way. When you see the world a bit differently, when your paradigm shifts, then you begin to be empowered, and you can even use the knowledge that you've had all of this time to its fullest capacity. So it's about transformative learning as well. And that's why it's so important that we don't treat this like a chemistry course, right? So if you've had basic chemistry and you go take an advanced chemistry course, then you learn more things, and ultimately you're able to create some things on your own. But what I'm saying is, this is about you sort of being mentally ready to receive this. So that's how you get the most out of the book. So one of those things is that you got to recognize that most of the time you're not really listening, because what's going on is that you have this dialogue going on in the back of your head, and I can't even get a word in edgewise. You are talking to yourself while I'm talking to you, right? And so you've got to make sure that you're listening and you're receiving and you're interacting in a way that furthers your cause, rather than just kind of getting in your head saying, this is not going to work. I've had that experience and all that. When you're in your head, then you're not present. And so that's why I always tell people, the other thing that I mentioned here is, you're not going to believe a word that I'm going to tell you. you're only going to believe what you say to yourself about what I just said. You see, because that internal dialogue is constantly reinforcing to you. I agree with that. I disagree with that. Yeah, that's right. That's wrong. This and that. So stay tuned sort of into that conversation and recognize that it is going to make a difference for you. The next point around this, and once I get done with this section, I'll stop to see if you have any questions, but this section around how to get the most out of the book, it is now or never. Look, I say later in the book that there is, transformative realizations have an expiration date. So if you realize something, get in action, do something with it. Don't just write it down and put it somewhere in the drawer. It's not going to make a difference for you. It's going to go into that someday pile, like my book was for years and years. And then someday I actually did something with it. So get in action right now. Next thing we're going to talk about extensively is how committed are you? Look, are you just interested in sort of dabbling into this thing? That helps you as well. But if you're truly committed to get something and do something with it, then it makes a difference. Next thing is, look, I know that many of our bosses are the barriers. In some cases, the coronavirus is the barrier. In some cases, our budget is the barrier. I want you, as you participate in this, to declare yourself the barrier. You see, because what happens is, what we're going to talk about is what kind of power you have over those external barriers and problems, okay? And the only way we can do that is stop sort of focusing on how we can change somebody else to why is it that I'm tolerating this problem? And look, for those of us who have an issue with our boss, right? I've used this example before, and I know it's a bit extreme. I would imagine that, if our problems are big enough, we do something about them. But if they're not big enough, then what happens is we just live with them. And the example that I use is, if your boss comes into your office every single day and slaps you physically, right? I've never had anybody say to me, well, you know what? I got this problem with my boss. He comes into my office and slaps me. How long has it been going on? 6 months. Oh, really? No, I never heard that. Why? Because that only has to happen one time. And they're like, look, I will not tolerate that, right? Whatever happens, I'm going to deal with it. I'm not going to allow this to happen. But sometimes the problems that we kind of complain about, whether it's our boss or the economy, this and that and the other, are things that we're just kind of saying, you know what, it's not bad enough for me to do something about, but it's bad enough that it bothers me. So the question here is, why am I tolerating the problems that I have? And so there are a number of other points here around how you can get the most out of the book. There's that section in the book starting page 25 that really talks about that. But let me stop here again for a moment. We've got another 13 minutes or so, I think. Let me stop for a moment and see if you have any questions or comments before I get into the culture that the transformative leaders create.
We don't have any questions right now, but I just wanted to respond to Jose Morales. He says, in response to you talking about the community that we're going to be launching, he said, that's a fantastic idea. Having like-minded people sharing learnings and challenges in this unusual time will help us grow together. And so I just wanted to say, Jose, that we're super excited. We've been working on this for a while, and we can't wait to tell you guys more about it in the coming weeks.
Awesome. Really great. And I believe, Nassim, on the book study page, do we have a wait list for that already? Have we unveiled that wait list?
I think we have at the very bottom, and Naveed and I are working behind the scenes this week and early next week to really polish that up so that, and give you guys a launch date for that.
Okay. So yeah, not to interrupt you, but since Nassim put it in the notes, I know that I have license to say it's called On the Court, and many of you have heard me talk about On the Court, and this is called On the Court, forum. So basically, we're going to tell you more about it. Thank you so much, Jose. We're so excited as well. So really, really awesome. And I see Lauren loves it too, On the Court. Awesome. Great, Lauren. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Lauren was one of our HR directors when I was with Sunny D, and he talks about the transformation that we made happen there using similar concepts. Anyway, so let me talk very briefly about, excuse me, this this part of the book that says the culture that the transformative leader creates. But again, here, I want to remind you, you don't have to be the leader, the top leader to create this culture. But here I describe 34 distinctions starting on page 41, 34 distinctions between a traditional culture and what I call an HCC, which stands for high commitment cultures. Okay. And so the high commitment culture, and I will go over a few of these with you just briefly. So one of those is, in a traditional culture, there is a rule for everything. You know, there's a rule book, and hey, if this is the situation, this is what we do. But in a high commitment culture, we lead by principles, which have flexibility. They are guides, but they have flexibility. In traditional cultures, there are hard and fast boundaries on jobs, you know, and people have limited skills. But in a high commitment culture, everyone shares in handling the less desirable work, and we can flow to the work. And you know what? You can apply these principles, by the way, that we're talking about, not just in the workplace, but at home, at any place, right? If you have hard and fast rules versus if you have principles, if you have principles, it gives you flexibility. Right now, as we're dealing with this global change that has hit all of us, those people who just manage by rules are completely lost by now. But the ones who are able to adapt and adjust quickly are the ones that operate by principles. I know one of the companies that's represented here, I'll maintain confidentiality here, but man, literally within 2 weeks, they've completely taken everybody virtual, and they have not missed a beat. And I love it. I'm working with them, and I absolutely love it. You know, there are other things like that are really self-explanatory. I won't go into them. Obviously, low trust, high trust, dictatorship in traditional versus servant leadership, or people work independently in their silos, in their sort of business units or functional silos, whereas in a high commitment culture, we collaborate. So there are many of these that resonate anyway with you. I'm not going to talk about it in detail. In a traditional culture, bosses are only interested in the employee's output. Whereas in a high commitment culture, leaders genuinely care about and nurture the employee as a whole person. Right now is a great time for us to practice this, because it's not about just having a Zoom call at 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night to make sure you did your work because you're working from home. You might be just screwing off or whatever. No, it's about, how are you doing? How's your family? How are things working out for you? You care about me as a person, then I'm going to bring my whole self. Then, you know, I'll just mention one more. In a traditional culture, systems and policies are designed for the 5% that are going to abuse them. And the rest of us have to suffer through that. Whereas in a high commitment culture, the systems and policies are designed for the 95% who are going to do the right thing. Yes, there are some rules. When it comes to compliance, when it comes to certain safety, equality, or whatever, yes, there are some things that we're not going to just say, oh, we trust our people. No, we're going to make sure those things are done right. But in a high commitment culture, we design our systems assuming that people want to do the right thing. So again, I also mentioned several counterfeit sort of behaviors that may seem like a high commitment culture, but they really are not. So I mentioned several of those that you can watch out for to make sure that you're not just making it look like you're a high commitment culture. But let me just stop here for now and see if we have any other questions.
No questions, but I did want to share, Anna Kirk said she has to drop off in a few minutes to join another call, but she wanted to thank you for your inspiration and encouragement. She said she's been following you virtually since last September at the Apex conference in Vegas. And even though she knows she's a work in progress and still has a lot to learn, she feels like she's improved as a leader since hearing your lecture and reading your book. So she wanted to thank you for your LinkedIn messages and videos. And she says that you set an amazing example for all
Thank
of us.
you so much. Anna is a wonderful leader, and she's constantly working to make herself better. I truly appreciate the comment. Thank you so much for sharing that. And so there's really just one more section, if I'm not mistaken, and then we're going to wrap up for today, and we'll get going for the next one. And that is foundational principles and beliefs, right? So if this is the kind of culture that you get to create in the workplace or in your team or your family or your community, what are some of the foundational beliefs and principles that are going to make a difference? And I'm just going to hit a few of these. And so the first thing is, do you really want it? I mean, do you really want that, or are you just dabbling into it? The other thing that I would say is, look, a lot of times, one of the principles that I want you to get is that where you are right now mentally is not a product of what has happened to you in the past. It may seem like it, but I say in the book, the good news is that, basically, even though we don't have a time machine to go back and fix the past, it is really your future, the future that you anticipate, that is making you who you are right now. So by actually boldly declaring something, you begin to shift your perspective to something really positive. I talk about the 3 C's of success. And these C's are, first of all, starting with creating the future. So that's the first C, create a future you're excited about. Secondly, complete the past. If you're dragging some stuff from the past, and I go into a lot of detail on every one of these on page 64, but if you're dragging some stuff with you from the past, put it down. And I give you some examples of how you can do that. You can forgive somebody, you can ask for forgiveness, you can let some stuff go. And finally, the third C is choose the present moment exactly as it is. You may not have had a choice. If somebody asked you, hey, would you like to have this coronavirus happening? You might have said, not really. But guess what? That's not how life works. Life says, here, coronavirus, right? And so choose doesn't necessarily mean accept it as the status quo and that's how it's always going to be. Choose just simply means that if you had a choice, make an assumption that if you had a choice, you chose this because it's your only starting point. So you don't have a choice anyway. So you might as well say, look, we are where we are. We're just going to go make it happen. Another foundational principle is you have to understand that you are what you think about. So who you are is not who you think you are, because you think of yourself through the lens of all the limiting thoughts and everything. And we're going to break this down as we go through the series. But just think about, there's a section called Who Do You Think You Are? And I think this is a very important section for you to check out and check out.
Amir, what's the page on that? The page number. So
the page number, and I keep forgetting to tell you the page number. Yeah, so Who Do You Think You Are is on page 68. And then finally, I'll just cover one more thing. And keep in mind, we've just gone through 80 pages of the book in like a few minutes. So there's a lot more detail in there. And, if you want to dig into any of that, get in touch with me if you got questions or whatever. But the best way to do it is really pick up the book if you don't have it already. But I will end with this thought: I am the one, and it's not about me. So in the context of whatever is important to you in your life, you are the one. Declare yourself the one. And recognize that when you get in your head about yourself and what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, and what if this goes wrong? What if I look bad and all of that? It's not about you. So as long as you have that attitude, and you know what, you're gonna fall off, or you're gonna get off track. I do it all the time, and all there is to do is get back on. So what I really look forward to is going through at least the 8 one-point lessons that I've identified over the course of next 4 sessions. And so again, on the registration page, you see the listing of those. So please check out the the reading assignment, and ideally read those. We've already sent you a link, download and read those reading assignments, and come next time prepared to have a conversation. Well, come anyway, whether you're prepared or not, but preferably you will be. And I'll go over some of the highlights, and we'll engage in a conversation within this community. Once again, I really thank you for being here, and I wish you all the best, and I'll see you next week on this call. Thank you so much.